This video focuses on something we've talked about a little bit throughout the course of the year already, which is the appointment process and confirmation process for federal judges. We've already previously talked about that this is one of the powers that the president has, which is the ability to appoint people to fill vacancies on the Supreme Court and, to be honest, all of the federal courts, right? And that they generally have life terms. So that's a pretty significant power, and then we talked about it that it's Congress's job to basically approve those appointments. And we've talked about this a couple times during the course of the year because we've already looked at Congress and the president. So it's just a review. So this is how the nomination process works. And to be honest, this it says the Supreme Court, which gets all the attention, but it's all the other like levels of the federal court system too that actually hear a lot more cases in the Supreme Court where when there are vacancies, the president gets to nominate like a replacement. That's the power of being president, is that you just get to fill like these vacancies. So the first process is when there's a vacancy, we're going to focus on the Supreme Court. There's only 9 positions, but when a vacancy comes up because a judge resigns or dies, the president gets to nominate a replacement. Right? This is step number one. Right? Is the president actually nominating a replacement? And again, it's pretty awesome power a president has because that person's going to be on the court for probably decades to come. President's going to leave after either 4 or 8 years in office, but that replacement that's probably going to share a lot of the similar views of the president is going to be there for a lot longer than that. So that's step one, is the president nominates a candidate for replacement. Step number two, we talked about how Congress divided itself into committees. The House of Reps doesn't really have anything to do with this. It's the Senate. And it's one of the more prestigious committees in the Senate that basically gets to do this. It's the Judiciary Committee that gets to review sort of like the nominee, gets to like essentially interview the replacement. As of the moment, on February 3rd, 2021, Lindsey Graham, a Republican from South Carolina, is still technically the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. That like would be responsible for like running these hearings and confirmation hearings. But that's only because the Democrats, which now have control of the Senate, they just haven't gotten around to like changing who's leading each committee yet. So eventually, shortly, a Democrat will be the chairperson of the Judiciary Committee. The job of the Judiciary Committee is to like bring the nominee before them and ask them like a million questions about like their background and previous decisions they've made and their experiences and how would you rule in a situation like this, right? So this Judiciary Committee, the hearings are like broadcast on TV, and it becomes kind of this big public spectacle. It's like a public like job interview conducted by the Judiciary Committee. Step number three is that essentially this committee basically makes their full recommendation to the Senate, like, hey, we think this person would do a great job. We don't recommend this person, or like we're just not going to weigh in one way or the other, right? So it's sort of the process of like them giving their recommendation of what the rest of the senators should do for this nominee. And then step number four is the entire Senate gets to vote on whether this person actually will get the job. Like this is called confirmation. And you need 51 votes to confirm a nominee. So the president nominates the candidate, they go through the interview process, but it requires 51 senators to basically agree to a nomination. The turning point in this process, you can probably point back to like 1987. That man right there, his name is Robert Bork. He was nominated by President Reagan at the time to fill a vacancy on the Supreme Court. Reagan was a Republican. Bork definitely had a track record of being a judge, and if you were just basing your decision as a senator on his experience, is he a competent judge? They would have voted yes. But Bork had some pretty controversial like comments and decisions in his background. He argued in favor of like state rights, dealing with segregation, and there's pretty controversial things. And the Democrats in the Senate actually voted down his nomination, not because he was not going to be a qualified judge, because they disagreed with a lot of his past sort of like views on issues. And this has begun the process now. Up until like 1987, it was just kind of like, all right, are you qualified to be a Supreme Court judge? And that's kind of how they voted. But since this event in 1987, it's more about agreement with their views and their previous decisions and things like that. It's become much more politically divided, like everything else in our society today. And like these confirmation hearings just have become nasty between the two parties. And you can trace a lot of this back to Bork's failed nomination in 1987. It's also important to take note of like what factors would a president take into consideration before nominating a federal judge, right? Like party affiliation, right? There's no doubt that like a president is not if a president's Republican, he's not going to nominate a Democrat to fill one of these vacancies, or like vice versa, because you'd be putting people into the court system that like block your policies like later on down the line. So this is like number one. Like you're gonna put somebody in the courts, whether it's Supreme Court position or federal court position, that are more likely to agree with you politically. Previous experience, like obviously you don't want your nominee when they go before the Judiciary Committee to be outed as someone that is like grossly underqualified to be a judge. So generally you're going to pick someone that has previous legal experience. Age is usually a factor. If you nominate a younger judge, like that person can sit on the court for a much longer sort of like period of time, having your legacy live on through them. Some presidents care about this more than others, trying to diversify the Supreme Court, trying to put more women on the court, minorities on the court, right? Like you definitely see this. Obviously, President Trump nominated Amy Coney Barrett, right, who is a female. There are more females on the Supreme Court now than there ever have been in our country's history. And if you look at it, Trump again had 3 nominations onto the Supreme Court, which is almost unheard of. In just 4 years in office, he has basically nominated and had approved a third of the Supreme Court, and all of them are relatively young. And obviously, Trump was voted out in 2020, but these 3 justices, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett, will be on the Supreme Court for probably decades to come. And then the last thing that a president might take into consideration, and this wouldn't be for the Supreme Court, this would be for like any of the other federal court positions. So there are like courts of appeals and district courts on the federal side all throughout the country. It's an unwritten rule called Senatorial Courtesy. And this is basically like a president won't submit a judicial nominee if the senator from the nominee's home state opposes it, as long as the president and the objecting senator are from the same party. So if Trump was still president and there was a vacancy in one of the lower federal courts, not the Supreme Court, and he nominates a replacement judge from Pennsylvania, he would have asked Toomey, who is the Republican senator from Pennsylvania, hey, I'm thinking about nominating Judge X. She's from Pennsylvania. Do you have any issues with this? And out of respect for Toomey, if Toomey says, yes, I don't like this judge for some reason, the president would give that courtesy to the senator and pick somebody else. Doesn't have to do this, but this is just a long-held courtesy held between the president and the Senate. Obviously, President Trump in this case wouldn't consult with Casey, the other senator of Pennsylvania, who's a Democrat. And now that Biden is president, he wouldn't consult with Toomey, he would consult with Casey. And if you have a Republican president or a Democratic president, and then 2 opposite party senators from your state, like you wouldn't honor the request anyway. So this is kind of an informal tradition that a president would extend to a Senate member from a state that is from the same political party as him.